Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today, as we continue our journey through Bob Dylan's discography, we get to Love and Theft. Again, as I go through these later ones, I keep thinking, now we finally reached the present. I remember listening to this album as a kid thinking, this is Bob Dylan today. That was the Bob Dylan of yesterday, but it's 22 years ago now. Wow. So let's talk about these tracks. This song opens up with a song called Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And as I was listening to this, I thought, wow, this is a return to Bob Dylan of the Highway 61 Blonde on Blonde days. A time when he could write long, numerous verses, mixing references to American folklore and outlaw and crime stories, but also just being nonsensical, to use the modern term, being a bit of a troll, coming across as really pretentious and smart, but only sort of really having something to say. Bob Dylan, no matter what the era, he always writes a lot of lyrics, but this style of playful, faux intellectual lyrics feels like really something from his 1960s classics that we haven't seen in a while. I actually talked with this previous album, Time Out of Mind, how those songs felt a lot more like intentional, direct storytelling. They didn't feel like, just putting bits of nonsense together. Now, the title Tweedledum and Tweedledee refers to an Old English nursery rhyme, which is made famous through Lewis Carroll's In the Looking Glass and then the Disney Alice in Wonderland movie. And I don't know if Bob Dylan has referenced Lewis Carroll up to this point. I mean, he has so many lyrics he very well might have, but it's a match that really makes sense because, again, two people who loved words and not two people who always loved making sense. Lewis Carroll wrote the Jabberwocky. Track number 2, Mississippi. This is my co-favorite song on the album, and it's certainly the most impressive song on this record. Were Bob Dylan's career to have ended with this album, this would have made a great swan song for him. So for starters, It's Hard Not to Hear the Chorus is a nostalgic reference to the Blonde on Blonde song, Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again. That one goes, oh, mama, can it really be the end to be stuck inside a mobile with the Memphis Blues again? Whereas this chorus goes, the only thing that I did wrong was stay in Mississippi a day too long. A key part of Bob Dylan's identity was being this northerner, but who liked to pretend he was from the West and South, part of this core, real America. Thus, it's important for him to sing about being from or being in Mississippi. Now, the substance of the lyrics of the song feels something more like from his 1985 album, Empire Burlesque. Empire Burlesque, in addition to being awkwardly 1980s, a lot of synthesizers in its musical sound, kind of didn't work for me because the lyrics all felt like what I'd call mature love songs, and that they were disproportionately about couples who seemed to have been together for a long time and now were having some kind of marital dispute, but just nothing interesting about it. Those lyrics felt kind of mundane. Mississippi feels like it's in that same kind of relationship, but it's just sung from such a place of passion that it actually becomes a very interesting song. And again, it might be the framing. So if we think of the song as being sung by Bob Dylan, and it's important to be careful with assuming things are autobiographical, but I guess one could interpret the chorus as saying the thing I did wrong is I became so obsessed with my musical identity, and this makes it difficult to fully be immersed in the more normal, mundane parts of life. My head was stuck in Mississippi, trying to be Mr. America, trying to be Woody Guthrie. And then finally, the vocals on this song, as on this whole album, are very scratchy. So that's one side of Bob Dylan, but it's still a very melodic, beautiful song. And there's even a catchy guitar riff. So Mississippi, perfect composition, should rank amongst the all-time Bob Dylan greats. Track number 3 is called Summer Days. This song has the sound of being right on the cusp historically between jazz and rock and roll, like Louis Jordan or early Ike Turner. And this song first seems to be on the lighter side, but it eventually becomes the story of an outlaw who tries to get married and then can't stay in the relationship because he's in trouble or something like that. Track number 4 is called By and By. If Summer Days sounded a little jazzy, this one sounds very jazzy. And the lyric about painting the town, that must be a reference to the old Billie Holiday standard, Painting the Town Red. As with the last song, my first thought when listening to this one is this is more Bob Dylan experimenting with musical genre than telling a story. But Bob Dylan can't just write a straightforward, normal song. After it mostly feels like a song about a mature relationship, it ends with a weird verse about aggravating the partner's parents. So who knows what's going on there. So I said Mississippi was my co-favorite song on the album. The other one that's really special to me is track number 5, Lonesome Day Blues. Now that's partially the nostalgia talking because this is the first Bob Dylan song I have a conscious memory of hearing. Now, it's not the first Bob Dylan song I would have heard. I think my dad was playing Bob Dylan for me when I was very little, and this album came out, I don't remember the exact dates, when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Wow, so of all the release dates one wouldn't know, this feels like one that's a good answer to a trivia question.
This is the first Bob Dylan I ever really think of, and it's funny because this is the first Bob Dylan I remember, I thought of him as having an extremely scratchy voice. So when I later heard the song Like a Rolling Stone, when he doesn't yet have this version of his quote-unquote bad voice, I thought, wow, he has the voice of an angel when he's young. He sounds amazing. So Lonesome Day Blues is very standard 12-bar blues. And lots of times when I've listened to these kind of songs on earlier Bob Dylan albums, or in general, I get bored of them very quickly because, well, they sound the same. But this was probably, again, the first 12-bar blues I ever consciously heard, and it's just also very well recorded. The guitar riff is so emphatic, and you have that scratchy voice going, "My dad left me, my brother got killed in a war." I mean, that was certainly a striking lyric to listen to as a 7 or 8-year-old. Again, this song is probably more about genre, maybe just Bob Dylan improvising around, probably not a real deep story that's supposed to be interpreted, though maybe there's some sort of metaphor for an alienated young man joining the American army, becoming a pawn of imperialism in the last verse. I don't know. That's probably a stretch. Track number 6 is called Floater, brackets, Too Much to Ask. We see some more experimentation with vintage genre music. It has kind of a Dixieland feel. And the lyrics start out just being like, life in the South, I'm happy, I'm marrying my second cousin. But the song goes on to develop from this more aw shucks kind of mode to life is pretty mediocre around here. If there was Romeo and Juliet down here, they'd hate each other. Track number 7 is called High Water, brackets, for Charlie Patton. This is a dark song, but not necessarily one with a bleak sound. I would describe it as kind of being like a folk version of Gimme Shelter in its affect. I don't really know if it's about the blues singer Charlie Patton. Not that I know much about Charlie Patton other than that he had a rough life and died pretty young, and he had a song called High Water. But yeah, this one feels just more of a pastiche of references to things being unpleasant in Mississippi in particular and the South in general, with references to Civil War battlegrounds and controversy around Charles Darwin and new ideas, etc. Track number 8 is Moonlight, and we see Bob Dylan experimenting with a jazz thing again. And on the one hand, this one seems to be a love song, but it's a song where he says, I want to be out in the moonlight alone. So the singer saying, if you're going to love me, you have to accept I'm this rambling, lonely, out there persona. Track number 9 is called Honest With Me. This one is a dramatic shift into a more rock and roll sound. And like the first couple songs in the album, this one reminds me of Blonde Blonde in that it feels kind of nonsensical and kind of saying, yeah, I'm a difficult, eccentric person, and the world is full of difficult, eccentric people, at least in the city. Track number 10 is called Po' Boy. At first glance, this feels a bit more like a social justice song, but it's just as much a rambly, nonsensical Dylan song as anything else. For example, towards the end, there's a part that goes, knocking on the door, I say, who is it and where are you from? Man says, Freddie. I say, Freddie who? He says, Freddie or not, here I come. There is a more interesting line in the song where Desdemona kills Othello. So I don't know if that's like a reference to, white women making false accusations against black men in the South, because in the Shakespeare play, it's Othello who kills Desdemona. So something is going on with Bob Dylan subverting that, but who knows? Track number 11 is called Cry for a While. This is a blues song, and I thought the chorus of I'll cry for you, now it's your turn to cry for a while is pretty memorable. It could be about setting emotional boundaries, but more broadly, it could be about listeners having high expectations of Bob Dylan, wanting him to have these profound lyrics, and him saying, no, I've given you plenty of profound songs over the years, and now try and say something yourself. That last track on this album is really weird. It's called Sugar Babe. Unlike a lot of the songs, which I'm easily able to say, this is Bob Dylan experimenting with one vintage genre or another. I don't really know what this one sounds like. There's a bit of a strange accordion on it. And the chorus, I guess, sees Bob Dylan re-exploring his misanthropic mode. Sugar baby, get down on the road. You ain't got no brains, no how. You went years without me. Might as well keep going now. And like many of the songs on here, and like much in Bob Dylan's catalog in general, it's hard to tell. Is he telling a story? Is there some real inspiration before this? Or is he just improvising with verses that sound cool to him in the moment? So overall, Love and Theft broadly continues the trajectory of older Bob Dylan having a more morose feel, but what feels different about it than a few of the albums before it is those couple of really lively, passionate songs in Mississippi and Lonesome Day Blues. So not my favorite Bob Dylan album, but it certainly had those high moments. Let me know what your thoughts are on it in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.